It's kind of like what Pipsqueak said about traffic regulations. It's like, if you're driving above the speed limit, you're speeding. If you're driving below the speed limit, you're obstructing traffic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because that was an actual thing that was brought up in the Discord. Someone who was pulled over for obstructing traffic because she was going 10 miles under the speed limit while accelerating to the speed limit.
And I like that third one that he said. And if you're driving the exact speed limit, well, I don't know. Well, I don't know, but the cop will think of something to ticket you for.
Your taillight's out.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Because there was one where they actually, it's on YouTube, but it was this whole thing that just escalates and leads to the guy getting arrested and everything else because, he didn't want him to search his car and he knew it was right on. They ended up arresting him. And the whole thing, the whole pretext for pulling him over was that his turn signal was out. But according to the dash cam footage, it shows clearly when the guy made the turn, his turn signal was working.
Yeah.
So the whole reason for pulling him over for failure to signal was a lie.
Yeah. Or they do like that scene in Porky's. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, you're also getting fined because you're driving a car with a broken light. But my light's not broken. Now it is.
And then when they finally get back at him, they even smash the hood ornament. It's a $50 fine, broken hood ornament.
Yeah.
Anyone remember hood ornaments? It's been a while since cars have had those.
Another thing too that I hear about, with your taillights out is even if it is I'm pretty sure, what if the person knows, his taillights out and he's on his way to get it fixed?
Well, that's why they're just supposed to get you a warning.
Yeah.
But then they get up to your car and go, I smell marijuana or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's a pretext.
Yep. Here's another interesting advice I've heard all the time. If a police officer ever pulls you over and they ask you, you know why I pulled you over, sir? It's like, even if you know it's because you were speeding and all that, don't say anything. Say, no, officer, why did you pull me over?
Yeah, make him tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, even if you know for a fact that you were speeding, the burden of proof is on the officer, not you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if they tell you you're speeding, they have to show you the radar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean your car was the one it was pointed at. But
yeah. The only problem is, though, and unfortunately, this is a sad reality, the reason why you kind of have to, be compliant with police officers, as we just said earlier, the sad reality is that if you try to exercise your rights, there's way too many police departments out there that interpret as upholding your rights as being violent and resisted.
Yep.
So
and they're even resisting things like for years, people have been trying to say, okay, you got the radar guns, put a camera with a zoom lens on the radar gun so that we can see exactly which car it was pointed at when it went off. And the cops and the state troopers and the higher ups that are so dead set against it. Well, why? If they're actually pulling over the right cars, why would they have a problem with that?
Well, they got to get those ticket quotas in somehow. Yeah, that's the worst. That's the worst kept secret in police departments. Even though they're not allowed to, and in some places they're banned, they do it all the time.
Oh yeah, they do it.
Yeah, many. Yeah,
but a lot of times, what? Because a lot of times you have the YouTubers who do the car things, and they'll have like a couple angle, one on them and one on the dash, and they're going 55 or whatever the speed limit is, and the cop pulls them over and. Here's the radar, 65, but they bring the video in the court that shows they were going 55. And it's like, what's apparently happening is that there is a speeder and they clock this guy at, 65 or 75 or whatever he's going, but they pull over this guy because he's going slower and he's easier to catch. That's all it is.
Well, and another reason too why they do this is because it's a money making thing, because
it's for raising revenues and no other purpose.
Yep.
It does not make us safer.
Yeah, that's why I can't take the defund the police movement seriously, because it's like, people, even if you eliminate, you basically say, we'll still have a police department, but the state will no longer pay them. That's not the only way police departments make money. The majority of their money is through tickets and civil asset forfeiture. And in all honesty, I think that's what's going to happen if, some of these cities do take the defund the police. It's going to be like, yay, the police are no longer being funded by our taxpayer dollars. Wait a minute. Why are we getting all these tickets?
Don't defund the police. Just give them less to do.
Yeah.
That's what they're, because, in states where marijuana is legal, they can't do the I smell marijuana thing.
Yeah.
And then the drug. So, I mean, if you make all of that legal, then say, okay, cops, you're not doing that anymore. You got to focus on real criminals.
Yeah.
Then you take that power away from them.
Yeah.
But when you make things crimes that aren't real crimes, that's what happens.
Yeah.
Rainbow Asteroid says, I was tailgated by a state trooper when I was going the speed limit. That's what they'll do, especially if they're in an unmarked car. They'll tailgate you and ride you and try to, get you to go above the speed limit. And if you get afraid and go above the speed limit, they pull you over. That's entrapment. I have no idea how they get away with that, but it's entrapment.
Yeah, the sad reality with entrapment is that, because like you said, the burden of proof is on the person, and if you try to file an entrapment charge, the problem is that the police, are one of the few criminals that can legally get away with hiding evidence. So,
yeah, they generally won't pull you over, Cold Ramen, for 5 miles over, but a lot of places, if you do the speed limit, you will get people like tailgating you for real. So everyone knows the speed limits are set way too low.
Yeah.
I mean, traffic engineers say that if you have speed limits at all, set it at the 85th percentile, which they don't. They set it way lower than that.
Yeah.
But it's still the case where if they change the speed limit or even remove speed limits entirely, it doesn't really change the speed everyone's going.
Yeah,
But there are actually fewer accidents and fatalities when you do that.
Yeah, fun fact, and we brought this up. There's a lot of European areas that don't have, set speed limits and not as much, traffic signs, and we don't see people crashing into each other all the time.
Well, Montana, for several years until the Montana Supreme Court somehow was able to tell them to put it back, they took out all speed limits on their state highways and rural roads, and they only had speed limits in cities. You can go whatever speed you wanted for like 8 or 9 years until the Supreme Court made them put speed limits back up, in which case it made it 80 or something like that. But they've done studies of Montana during that time as compared to the time before, and when you consider per mile driven, the number of cars on the road and the number of miles they went, accidents and fatalities went down massively after they did that. And this was right after they repealed the federally mandated 55, and states were raising theirs to 75 or 80 or whatever. And Montana said, we're just not going to have them. But I have no idea how the Supreme Court can say, no, you have to have speed limits.
Yeah.
That's interpretation of the Constitution for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, believe it. Well, I mean, you mentioned this before too. It's like there was one of the reasons why the alcohol limit is only 21, even though many people agree that's largely too high and it's kind of stupid. The only reason that did is because, believe it or not, there actually is nothing stopping states from getting rid of it. It's just that the federal government said, you can set your drinking limit at whatever you want. However, if it's anything below 21, we're not going to give you federal highway funding.
Yeah, it's something like 15% of the federal highway funds they lose.
Yeah. And you brought this up. That probably wouldn't have happened if the U.S. didn't have that amendment that basically said people can vote for senators now.
17th Amendment, yeah. Because before 1913 was a really bad year, because that was also the year of the Income Tax Amendment and the year they created the Federal Reserve. But so before then, senators were appointed by state legislatures, and they would never have put up with Congress going, state legislatures, you have to do this, even though we have no constitutional mandate to make it. They go, no, okay, you're not a senator anymore. Yeah. You're out of there.
People fail to realize the whole point of the Senate not being elected directly by the people. That was to balance it out. The whole point of the House of Representatives was to represent the people, and the Senate was supposed to represent the state as a whole, and they were to keep each other in line, That way, if the Senate, said, oh yeah, all states, should pass this law and ban this object, the House would be there to say, no, the people won't take it. And vice versa. If, something happens and the people and the representatives are saying, oh, people, want these damn video games to be banned because they're causing all this stuff, the Senate's there to say, no, that's a waste of time and resources and we shouldn't be doing that. But we don't have that balance anymore.
Nope. And look at how powerful senators are now. And look at how much crap they can do.
Yeah.
The only problem I always had with the state legislature thing is I agree with it in principle. It's just the way both sides gerrymandered their state legislatures so hard now, like I don't
yeah,
I don't
they've always
trust
done that.
them to.
Yeah.
Right. So like if they weren't if like if they didn't have first past the post and there wasn't like gerrymandering, I would agree. That's just the only issue I have with that.